Have you ever truly seen the person pouring your wine, clearing your plates, the one who exists in the periphery of your gilded life? We build empires of glass and steel, certain of the foundations, only to discover the most brilliant architect in the room is the one refilling the water glasses, their true name a forgotten blueprint. Julian Croft, a man whose name was a verb in the language of hostile takeovers, believed he owned New York. He owned the skyline, the politicians, and certainly the future of his quietly rebellious granddaughter. He was wrong. When a world-weary waitress at a Michelin-starred restaurant used a breadstick to sketch the molecular structure of a fraudulent pigment on a linen napkin, it wasn't just a party trick. It was the pulling of a single thread that unraveled a 2-decade conspiracy, a conspiracy that threatened not just Julian's fortune, but the very definition of truth in a world built on beautiful lies. The low conspiratorial murmur of the gilded cage was a sound Julian Croft knew well. It was the sound of money talking to money, a symphony of hushed deals and discreet boasts played out under the warm, forgiving glow of crystal chandeliers. It was 8 p.m. on a Thursday. Julian, whose firm Croft Capital could swallow nations whole, did not do family dinners. He did power lunches. He did 7 a.m. board meetings that made grown men weep. He certainly did not do forced, awkward evenings with his 16-year-old granddaughter, Lily, who looked as out of place in her simple black dress as a wild flower in a meticulously curated orchid house. But grief, like desperation, makes for strange bedfellows. It had been a year since his son's car had met a patch of black ice, and the silence in his cavernous Fifth Avenue penthouse had become a physical weight. Julian adjusted the cuff of his Brioni suit, his gaze sweeping the room with the predatory assessment of a hawk. He noted the nervous tick of a rival hedge fund manager 3 tables over, the too intimate lean of a senator's wife toward a lobbyist. His mind was a ledger, constantly calculating, assessing, valuing. Across from him, Lily wasn't looking at the room. She was staring at her sketchbook, a pencil dancing in her fingers, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her posture, a gentle slump of teenage apathy, was a quiet act of war against the rigid formality of the restaurant. "Put that away, Lily," Julian said, his voice a low rumble that usually sent stock prices tumbling. "We are here to eat, not to doodle. That thing cost more than a car." He gestured vaguely at the plate of seared scallops in front of her. Lily didn't look up. "It's not doodling. It's a study of light. There are business programs at Wharton that will teach you all you need to know about liquidity," Julian snapped, checking his Patek Philippe. "That's a more useful study of light. Do you have any idea what the Japanese markets will do if I'm not on the phone at 10 p.m. tonight?" "They'd probably survive," Lily mumbled, adding a shadow beneath a sketched water glass. "The world doesn't revolve around your portfolio, Grandpa." Julian's jaw tightened. The problem wasn't just her attitude, it was her drift. Lily was a ghost in his world of solid assets. Since the accident, she had retreated into her art, her grades in subjects he deemed important, economics, math, history, plummeting. It was an unacceptable flaw in the Croft legacy. Julian Croft did not sire nor raise mediocrity. His son had been a brilliant lawyer. Lily, it seemed, was content to be a dreamer. "May I offer you, ladies and gentlemen, some more wine?" The voice was quiet, cultured, and carried a note of profound weariness. Julian looked up. Standing beside the table was a waitress. She was likely in her early 40s, but the years had been unkind. Her name tag, pinned neatly to her crisp black uniform, read Ilara. She was slender, with pale, intelligent eyes that seemed to absorb everything, and dark hair pulled back in a severe, functional bun. She had the kind of face that was designed for forgetting, yet her stillness was remarkable. She didn't fidget. She simply existed, a point of calm in the swirling chaos of the restaurant. "Just the check," Julian said, his tone a clear dismissal. At that moment, a man from the adjacent table, a portly real estate developer named Bill Harrington, whom Julian despised, leaned over. "Say, Croft, is that your girl? An artist, eh?" Harrington boomed, his voice slick with condescension. He gestured at Lily's sketchbook. "Don't let her waste her time. I just bought a masterpiece. A lost Vermeer. Cost me a cool 8 figures. Now, that's art. An asset." He proudly pulled out his phone and displayed a photo of a painting. A demure woman in a blue dress staring out a window. It was, to Julian's untrained eye, beautiful. Lily glanced at the photo, her artist's eye critical. "The chiaroscuro is a little heavy for Vermeer," she said quietly. "The shadows are too harsh." Harrington laughed, a sound like rocks in a blender. What would a kid know? It was authenticated by Marcus Thorne himself. Best in the business. Julian felt a surge of irritation at the public humiliation of his granddaughter. He was about to cut Harrington down when the waitress, Ilara, who had been standing silently, spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "She's right," Ilara said, her eyes fixed on the phone screen. Harrington turned, his face purpling. "What did you say?" Ilara didn't flinch. She pointed a long, graceful finger at the image. "The woman's dress. The pigment is ultramarine. In the 17th century, true ultramarine was ground from lapis lazuli, imported from Afghanistan. It was more expensive than gold. An artist like Vermeer would have used it sparingly, layered in thin glazes over an azurite base to create luminosity." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "That blue is flat, opaque. It has the uniform particle distribution of a synthetic pigment, probably French ultramarine, which wasn't invented until 1826. The painting is a fake. A very good one, but a fake nonetheless." A profound silence fell over the two tables. It was denser than the velvet curtains, heavier than the weight of the collective fortunes in the room. Harrington stared, his mouth agape like a landed fish. Lily looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes wide with astonishment. Julian looked at the waitress. He really looked at her. This woman, who earned in a year what he made in 30 seconds, had just delivered a doctoral thesis on 17th century pigment chemistry with the casual authority of a queen dismissing a courtier. "Who the hell are you?" Harrington sputtered. Ilara seemed to shrink back into herself, the light in her eyes dimming as if a switch had been flicked. She pulled her hand back, her composure fracturing. "My apologies, sir. I read a book once, in a magazine. It was just an observation." She turned to Julian's table. "Your check, sir." She placed the leather billfold on the table and walked away, her steps measured and swift, a retreat to the safety of the kitchens. Harrington was still stammering, his face a mottled red. But Julian wasn't listening. He was watching the waitress. He was a man who had built his empire on recognizing undervalued assets, and he had just seen a diamond in a coal mine. More than that, he had seen fear. The raw, primal fear of a creature that had been seen when its only defense was to remain invisible. "Grandpa," Lily whispered, her voice filled with a reverence Julian hadn't heard in years. "Did you hear her?" She knew about synthetic ultramarine. "I heard her," Julian murmured, his mind already spinning scenarios, calculating angles. He reached into his wallet, pulled out not his credit card, but 5 crisp $100 bills, and stood up. "Stay here, Lily." Julian walked not to the maitre d', but toward the swinging doors of the kitchen. He pushed through. The contrast was jarring. The hushed opulence of the dining room gave way to a chaotic blast of heat, steam, and clattering steel. Ilara was there, stacking plates, her back to him. "Ilara," Julian said. She froze, her shoulders tensing. She turned slowly. Up close, Julian could see the fine lines of exhaustion etched around her eyes, but also the fierce, guarded intelligence she was trying so desperately to conceal. "This is for your observation," Julian said, placing the cash on a steel counter. "But I require a more detailed explanation. Where does a waitress learn about the particle distribution of 17th century pigments?" Ilara looked at the money, then back at Julian, her expression unreadable. "Community college, art history elective. I have a good memory." "Don't lie to me," Julian said, his CEO voice clicking into place. It was the voice that dismantled companies and terrified boards. "I know talent when I see it, and I know the look of a woman with a secret big enough to bury her alive. You're terrified." "Why?" Ilara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "You have a lovely granddaughter, Mr. Croft. Everyone in New York knows who you are. Go home. Enjoy your dinner. Forget you ever saw me. Some things are more valuable when they remain unauthenticated." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice," Ilara said, her eyes pleading. "Take the win on the art lesson and leave. Please." Julian stared at her, the gears of his mind turning. This wasn't just a brilliant woman trapped in a menial job. This was a woman in hiding, and Julian Croft had just stumbled upon the lock to her cage. "My granddaughter is failing," Julian said, shifting his strategy. "She has talent, but no discipline, no focus. She needs a mentor, someone who understands the why of art, not just the how. I'll pay you $500 an hour, cash, to meet with her. Talk to her about art." Ilara let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I can't be seen walking into your penthouse, Mr. Croft. People like me don't exist in your world." "Then she'll meet you wherever you say," Julian insisted. "A museum, a library, a coffee shop." Ilara hesitated. Her gaze flickered past him, through the small porthole window in the kitchen door, to where Lily was sitting alone, sketching the salt shaker with intense concentration. A look of profound, aching sadness crossed Ilara's face. "Fine," she whispered, the word seemingly torn from her. "The Met, Egyptian wing, Tuesdays at 4, but no money. I don't want a record. And you tell no one, not your driver, not your assistants. If I see anyone who looks like they're watching us, I'm gone. Forever." "Deal," Julian said. As he walked back to his table, Julian felt a surge of exhilaration he usually only felt during a hostile takeover. It was the thrill of a discovery, of an asset yet to be leveraged. But as they left the restaurant, stepping into the cool Manhattan night, Julian glanced back. Ilara was standing just inside the kitchen doors, watching them leave. She wasn't looking at Julian. She was looking at Lily, and the expression on the waitress's face was not one of simple curiosity. It was an expression of painful recognition, as if she were looking at a ghost from a life she had long since murdered and buried. Julian slid into the back of his waiting Maybach, his mind racing. Why would a genius be hiding in plain sight? And why did she look at his granddaughter as if she were staring into a mirror of the past? He pulled out his encrypted satellite phone and dialed a number he kept for only the most sensitive tasks. A gravelly voice answered after one ring. "Sinclair." "Sinclair, it's Croft," he said, the city lights blurring past the tinted window. "I need a background check, a deep dive. A woman named Ilara. Works at the Gilded Cage. No last name given. I suspect it's an alias. She's a ghost, most likely. No digital trail. You'll have to use the old ways. Go back 20, maybe 25 years. Art world. Authentication. Conservation. Academia. Check records from Sotheby's, Christie's, the Sorbonne. She's not just smart, Sinclair. She's a prodigy. Understood. What's the angle? Julian gripped the soft leather of the seat. I think she's running from something that could get a man like Bill Harrington ruined in a sentence, and I just invited her into my granddaughter's life. The following Tuesday, the air in the Charles Engelhard Court of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was thick with the scent of old stone and recycled air. Sunlight streamed through the vast glass ceiling, illuminating the Temple of Denda in a golden haze. Julian sat on a stone bench pretending to read. The Wall Street Journal. But his eyes were tracking his granddaughter, Lily, who stood nervously by a display of canopic jars. He felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Guilt, perhaps. He had lied to Lily, telling her he'd hired a prestigious art tutor who preferred to remain anonymous. He'd also placed Sinclair and 2 other discreet security men among the tourists, their mission to watch, to identify any potential threats. At precisely 4:00 p.m., Elara appeared. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform. She was dressed in simple grey slacks and a worn but clean black turtleneck, a threadbare canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. She looked like a graduate student or a librarian, someone utterly anonymous. She moved with a quiet grace, her eyes scanning the crowd, not like a tourist, but like a field operative assessing a threat matrix. She spotted Julian instantly, her gaze lingering for a fraction of a second with a look of clear disapproval before she turned to Lily. Julian watched from a distance, close enough to hear their voices echo softly in the cavernous space. "Your grandfather told me you like to draw," Elara said, her voice softer now, without the hard edge of the restaurant. "I do," Lily said, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. "He thinks it's a waste of time." "He's wrong," Elara said simply. She didn't open a textbook or a binder. She gestured toward a massive granite sarcophagus covered in hieroglyphs. "Forget art for a minute. Look at that. What do you see?" "A coffin," Lily said, "with old Egyptian writing on it." "Look closer," Elara urged. "Don't look at the pictures. Look at the lines, the cuts in the stone. The man who carved this, he never made a mistake. Every line has a uniform depth. Every curve is perfect. The pressure of his chisel was constant for months, maybe years. That isn't writing, Lily. That's muscle memory. That's 1,000 hours of practice. That's discipline. Art isn't about inspiration. It's about control." For the next hour, Julian pretended to read the same article on pork belly futures 10 times over. He watched as Elara led Lily through the galleries, not lecturing, but questioning. In the European painting wing, she didn't talk about the artists. She talked about the canvases. "See the back of that Rembrandt?" she'd whisper, pointing to an exposed corner of a frame. "See how the linen is woven? That's a specific weave from a guild in Leiden. We know he bought his canvases from a man named Gerrit van Loo. If you see that weave on a painting supposedly from his Amsterdam period, it's a red flag. The story of a painting isn't just on the front, it's in the threads, the wood of the stretcher bars, the dust in the cracks." Lily was mesmerized. The sullen, defensive teenager had vanished, replaced by an eager student. She was sketching furiously, not the paintings themselves, but the details Elara pointed out. The pattern of cracks, craquelure, Elara called it, on a portrait. The way a specific varnish yellowed under the gallery lights. Julian felt that strange pang again, sharper this time. Jealousy. He could buy any painting in this museum, but he couldn't evoke this passion in his own granddaughter. He provided the trust fund, the apartment, the driver, but this ghost of a woman in a threadbare sweater was providing the meaning. Suddenly, Ilara froze. It was almost imperceptible. A slight stiffening of her spine. Her head tilted, her eyes fixed on a man standing near the entrance to the Sackler wing. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his silver hair gleaming. He was looking at a sculpture, but his posture was wrong. He wasn't appreciating art, he was surveying territory. Ilara subtly shifted her position, placing her body between Lily and the man. Her hand, which had been gesturing toward a Monet, dropped to her side and curled into a fist. It was the same primal fear response Julian had seen in the restaurant, magnified tenfold. "Ilara?" Lily asked, noticing the change. "Are you okay?" Ilara blinked, her focus snapping back. "Yes, fine. It's getting late. We should finish for today." The lesson was over. The magic was broken. She rushed them toward the main exit, her eyes constantly darting, checking reflections in the glass display cases. At the top of the grand staircase, she stopped. "Next week," she said to Lily, her voice tight. "Same time. But meet me at the public library on 42nd Street. The map room. It's quieter." She turned to leave, but Julian stepped forward, blocking her path. "Who was he?" Julian asked, his voice low. Ilara wouldn't meet his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The man in the grey suit by the Sackler wing. You saw him and you ran. Is he the reason you're hiding?" "You're a rich man, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You have enemies. Maybe he was watching you." She pushed past him and disappeared into the throng of tourists. As they were driven home in the Maybach, Lily was electric. "Grandpa, she's incredible. She said my sketches of the Krakelure showed a real eye for pattern recognition. She thinks I should study chemistry to understand the pigments. Can you believe it? Chemistry." "She is remarkable," Julian murmured, but his mind was on the man in the grey suit. As soon as they were back in the penthouse, Julian's phone buzzed. It was Sinclair. "Got a hit, Mr. Croft?" The investigator's voice crackled. "It was a long shot, but I cross-referenced art world prodigies who disappeared in the late 90s with major forgery scandals. I found her." He sent a file to Julian's secure tablet. Julian opened it. It was a scanned article from a 1998 issue of Art Forum magazine. A black-and-white photo showed a group of academics at the Getty Conservation Institute. In the center, a young woman with dark, brilliant eyes and a confident smile held a plaque. She looked vibrant, fearless. She was undeniably Ilara. But the name in the caption was not Ilara. It read, "Dr. Helena Sovich, whose groundbreaking work in non-invasive spectroscopy is revolutionizing the field of art authentication." Julian's breath caught. Dr. Helena Sovich. The name was infamous, a legend, a ghost story whispered in auction houses. The greatest authenticator of her generation, who, at the height of her fame, had authenticated a newly discovered Rembrandt, the Prophet Sleeping, which was later exposed as a masterful forgery. The scandal had destroyed her. She was accused of taking a bribe, of being an accomplice. She had faced professional ruin and federal charges. And then she had vanished. The official story was that she had taken her own life, her car found abandoned near the Golden Gate Bridge. "She's not a ghost, Sinclair," Julian whispered into the phone. "She's a woman who was supposed to be dead for 20 years. "There's more, sir," Sinclair said. "The man who exposed the forgery, who rose to prominence in the wake of her disgrace, her former mentor and partner. He bought out her share of their authentication firm for pennies on the dollar. He now runs the most powerful art advisory in the world, a man named Marcus Thorne. Sinclair sent another file. It was a recent photo from a society gala. A tall, handsome man with silver hair and cold, predatory eyes smiled for the camera. It was the man from the museum. The following week at Croft Capital was a bloodbath. A carefully planned acquisition of a German pharmaceutical company was falling apart. A rival firm, seemingly anticipating Julian's every move, was outmaneuvering him, driving up the price and poisoning the deal with regulatory hurdles. It was precise, surgical, and utterly baffling. It was as if someone could read his mind, predict his strategy before he even formulated it. Julian stood in his corner office, 60 floors above Manhattan, the city spread beneath him like a circuit board. 10 of his best analysts stood before his desk, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. "Explain it to me like I'm a child," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. How did they know we were going to leverage the Dutch subsidiary to avoid the tax implications? His head of M&A, a man who usually radiated Ivy League confidence, stammered. "Sir, we don't know. It's like they had our playbook. The leak isn't digital. We've swept everything. It's strategic. They're countering moves we haven't even made yet." "Get out," Julian said, waving a dismissive hand. "All of you. Fix it." He sank into his chair, the feeling of being outmaneuvered a bitter, unfamiliar taste. He checked his watch. 3:45 p.m. He was late. He was supposed to meet Lily at the library to drop her off for her session with Ilara. He wanted to cancel, to stay here and crush his unknown opponent. But a text from Lily flashed on his screen. "She's going to show me the library's original Audubon prints. Don't be late." He arrived at the Schwartzman building at 4:10, his mood darker than his suit. He found them not in the map room, but in a quiet corner of the rare books collection. Ilara, he still thought of her that way, and Lily were bent over a massive, leather-bound volume, their heads almost touching. Ilara was pointing to the page, her expression one of intense focus. "See?" she was saying. Audubon used a mix of watercolor, pastel, and gouache. But the real genius was the engraving. To get that level of detail, the engraver had to anticipate how the ink would bleed into the paper. He had to think not just about the lines he was carving, but about how the medium itself would behave. It's a predictive art. Julian cleared his throat. They both looked up, startled. "Sorry I'm late," he grumbled, his mind still on the collapsing deal. "Problems at the office. We're being bled dry by a ghost." Ilara's posture changed. A subtle shift, but Julian, now attuned to her, saw it. "A ghost?" she asked, her voice neutral. "A competitor who seems to know our strategy before we do," Julian vented, forgetting for a moment who he was talking to. "They anticipate our every move. It's like they're not just analyzing the data. They're predicting the pattern. It's impossible." Ilara froze. Her hand, resting on the ancient page, went perfectly still. Her eyes unfocused, her pupils dilating slightly. She was looking at the Audubon print, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. "Are they using asymmetric analysis?" she asked softly, the question so specific it was jarring. Julian stared at her. "What?" "In complex systems," she said, her voice gaining speed and confidence, the weary waitress replaced by the formidable academic. "People look for symmetry, for repeating patterns. But the real predictive power comes from the anomalies, the outliers, the single data point that doesn't fit. That's the key. Your opponent isn't reading your playbook. They're reading your psychology." She looked up at him, her eyes sharp and clear. You're an aggressive player, Mr. Croft. You favor overwhelming force, a blitzkrieg. Your strategy, while complex, has a signature, a rhythm. Your opponent has found the rhythm and is playing the counter-melody. They're not predicting your moves. They're predicting you. Julian felt a cold dread wash over him. The air in the quiet library seemed to crackle. How could you possibly know that? He asked. It's the same principle as authenticating a painting, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. A master forger can replicate every brush stroke, every pigment. But they can't replicate the artist's soul. There will always be a tell, a hesitation, a line that is too perfect, a moment of fear that betrays the forger's hand. Your opponent has found your tell. She reached for a loose piece of paper and a pencil from Lily's bag. She began to sketch, not a picture, but a diagram of intersecting circles and branching pathways. It looked like a complex decision tree. You need to introduce a variable they can't predict, she murmured, sketching furiously. An irrational move, something that goes against your own established patterns. Liquidate a profitable asset for no reason. Make a small, illogical acquisition in a sector you've never touched. It will look like a mistake. It will look like weakness, but it will shatter their predictive model. You'll be injecting chaos into their system, and in chaos, you can hide your real move. She pushed the paper toward Julian. It was a brilliant, terrifyingly simple strategy, a Trojan horse of irrationality. But one detail snagged his attention. At the bottom of the page, next to the final, devastating move she had outlined, she had drawn a small, almost invisible symbol, a stylized H and S intertwined. "What is this?" Julian asked, pointing to the symbol. Ilara, Helena, blanched. The color drained from her face, leaving it ashen. It's nothing. Just a habit." "That was the logo of your firm, wasn't it?" Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. "Sauvage Thorn Authentication. I saw it on the old letterhead in the files Sinclair sent me." Helena stood up abruptly, knocking a book from the table. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent room. "I have to go. The session is over." "Helena, wait," Julian said, standing to block her way. "Stop running. Who are you running from? It's Thorn, isn't it? He's the one doing this to my company. He's your ghost." "You don't understand," she hissed, her hands shaking violently. "It's not just about business. He doesn't just want to win. He wants to destroy." "Why?" Julian demanded. "What did you do to him?" Her eyes, filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed ancient, finally met his. "I didn't do anything to him. I created something for him, something he was never meant to have, and he's been using it ever since." She pushed past him and fled, disappearing among the towering shelves of books. Julian stood there, clutching the piece of paper. Lily was staring at him, her expression a mixture of fear and awe. "Grandpa," she said. "Who is she?" Julian didn't answer. He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of the diagram. He sent it to his head of M&A with a single command. "Execute this. Exactly as written. No questions." Then he dialed Sinclair. "Sinclair," he said, his voice grim. "I need to know everything about Marcus Thorne's business, not the art firm, his other interests, his holding companies, his data analytics ventures. I think Dr. Sauvage didn't just authenticate paintings. I think she taught him how to see the future." 5 minutes later, his M&A head called back, his voice breathless with excitement. "Mr. Croft, sir, it's working. We initiated the sell-off of the Singapore real estate portfolio, just like the diagram said. Our opponent, they panicked. They thought we knew about their exposure in that market and were trying to trigger a collapse. They started selling short. They've over-leveraged, and we have them in a corner. But sir, how did you know? This move, it's not just brilliant, it's clairvoyant. I had a consultant, Julian said, looking at the empty chair where Helena had sat. He hung up and looked at the small, intertwined logo she had drawn. H.S. Sovich Thorn. But it wasn't just a logo, it was a signature. And he realized with a sickening certainty that the ghost haunting his company and the ghost haunting the weary waitress were one and the same. He had thought he was hunting for a secret. He hadn't realized he was walking into a war. The alley behind the gilded cage was a slash of darkness between two brick behemoths, smelling of garbage and expensive kitchen exhaust. Julian Croft, whose shoes cost more than the rent on most Manhattan apartments, stood in the shadows, waiting. He had given up on subtlety. He needed answers, and he was done playing games. He'd told Lily to stay home, a lie that felt thin even to him. He was using his granddaughter's trust as bait, and the thought soured in his stomach. At 1:05 a.m., the kitchen's back door creaked open. Helena emerged, no longer Ilara the waitress, but a tired woman wrapped in a thin coat against the autumn chill. "We need to talk, Helena," Julian said, stepping out from behind a dumpster. She gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her chest. Her face in the dim light was a mask of pure terror. "You can't be here. He'll see you. He has people everywhere." "He already has," Julian said grimly. "My company is under attack. Your strategy worked for now. It bought me time, but it also confirmed his suspicions. He knows I'm with you. Now you're going to tell me everything. What did you create?" Helena leaned against the cold brick wall, a shudder racking her body. She looked up at the sliver of night sky, visible between the buildings. "It wasn't for authenticating art," she whispered. "That was just the beginning. I was a prodigy, you see. Not just with art, but with patterns. My mind, it sees connections others don't. In brushstrokes, in stock market fluctuations, in human behavior. It's all just data. It's all just patterns." She took a shaky breath. "Marcus, Thorn, he wasn't just my mentor. He saw what I could do. He pushed me. He gave me resources. We started a project, codenamed Project Vermeer, ironically enough. It wasn't about finding lost masterpieces. It was about creating a predictive model, an algorithm based on my own neural pathways, an algorithm that could analyze any complex system, a market, an election, a military campaign, and identify the hidden patterns the artists tell and predict its future with over 90% accuracy. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "You built a crystal ball." "We built a weapon," she corrected, her voice breaking. "I thought we were going to use it to prevent market crashes, to stabilize economies. But Marcus, he saw its true potential. Control. Absolute control. He used it to front-run the markets, to blackmail politicians. When I found out, I tried to destroy it. I tried to erase the code. He caught me. He told me he would ruin me. He framed me with the Rembrandt forgery, a painting he had commissioned himself. He used my own reputation against me. He made the world believe I was a fraud and a criminal." Her eyes were haunted. "He gave me a choice. Disappear and let the world think I was dead, or he would expose the algorithm and pin its illegal uses on me. I would have spent my life in a supermax prison. So I ran. I became Ilara. I gave up my name, my life, my entire existence. I thought if Helena Sovich was dead, the algorithm would be dormant. I was the only one who could truly operate it at its full potential." "But he's been using it," Julian realized. "That's how he's attacking my company. A degraded version, she said. Without me to refine it, it's blunt. It can see big patterns, but it lacks finesse. But he's getting better. He's been hunting for me for 20 years, not for revenge, but because he wants an upgrade. He wants the key. And the key is me. At that moment, a black sedan with tinted windows turned silently into the alley, its headlights off. It rolled to a stop, blocking the only exit. Helena's face went white. Oh, God. He found me. The back door of the car opened. A man stepped out. It wasn't Marcus Thorne. It was his lawyer, a man Julian recognized from charity galas, a shark named Peterson. "Dr. Sovich," Peterson said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Mr. Thorne sends his regards. He is so pleased you've decided to come out of retirement. And Mr. Croft, a pleasure. Mr. Thorne has an offer for you, a merger of sorts." "I'm not interested," Julian snarled. "Oh, I think you will be," Peterson said, a thin smile playing on his lips. He gestured to the car. The interior light came on. Lily was sitting in the back seat. She wasn't bound or gagged, but her face was pale with terror. Beside her sat Marcus Thorne, his arm resting casually on the back of the seat, a silent, chilling picture of ownership. Julian's world tilted on its axis, the ruthless calculus of business, the thrill of the hunt. It all evaporated, replaced by a cold, primal fear he hadn't felt since his son was a child, sick with a fever. She was on her way to a late-night art class. Thorne's voice flowed from the car's open door, calm and reasonable. "We offered her a ride. She's a lovely girl, Julian, so talented. It would be a shame if her artistic career were cut tragically short." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but absolute. "Let her go, Thorne," Julian said, his voice a low growl. "Of course," Thorne said. "This is all just a negotiation. I want Helena. She comes back to work for me. The algorithm gets the upgrade it needs. In return, your company survives. Your granddaughter comes home. And you, Julian, get a piece of the action. Imagine what we could do together. We wouldn't just own New York, we would own tomorrow." Helena stepped forward, her body trembling, but her voice steady. "No." Thorne sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. Helena, still so principled, so naive. You see, I don't need you to agree. I just need your mind. We have ways of encouraging collaboration." He looked at Julian. "You have 1 hour, Julian. Deliver Helena to the penthouse of the Thorne Tower. If you are late, or if I see a single police officer, I will instruct my driver to take a very scenic, very tragic route over the Williamsburg Bridge. The choice is yours. An asset for an asset." The car door closed. The sedan reversed silently out of the alley and was gone. Helena slumped against the wall, her breath coming in ragged sobs. "This is my fault. I should have stayed hidden." Julian's mind, which had been frozen in terror, rebooted. The fear was still there, but it was being compressed, forged into something else. Rage, cold, pure, and absolute. He had spent his life dominating his enemies, crushing them under the weight of his intellect and fortune. Thorne had made the fatal mistake of making it personal. "No," Julian said, his voice like chipping granite. "This is not your fault. This is his mistake." He grabbed her arm. "We're not giving you to him. We're going to get my granddaughter back. And then we are going to burn Marcus Thorne's empire to the ground." "How?" she cried. "He has her. He has the algorithm. He holds all the cards." Julian looked at her, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. "He thinks the algorithm is his greatest weapon. But you said it yourself. Every system has a tell. Every artist has a signature. You didn't just build his weapon, Helena. You designed it. Which means you know its flaws." A flicker of light returned to her eyes, a dawning realization. "The kill switch," she whispered. "Exactly," Julian said. "Every brilliant creator builds a back door. Where is it?" "It's not a line of code," she said, her mind racing, the fog of fear beginning to clear. "It's a paradox, a logical contradiction. If the algorithm is fed a specific dataset, a sequence that appears random but is actually a complex, recursive pattern, it will try to solve it. It will devote all its processing power to this impossible problem, locking itself in an infinite loop. It will effectively commit suicide." "What's the dataset?" "It's a painting," she said, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time. "A specific painting that doesn't exist. I designed it in my head 20 years ago. The forger's masterpiece. A painting that incorporates the techniques of a dozen different artists from a dozen different eras, all layered on top of each other. It's a chronological impossibility. To the human eye, it would look like a chaotic mess, but to the algorithm, it would be the ultimate pattern, the ultimate puzzle. It wouldn't be able to resist." "So we need to create this painting?" Julian asked. "We don't have time," she said. "But we don't need the physical painting. We just need to feed the data of the painting, the chemical composition of the pigments, the weave of the canvas, the mapping of the brush strokes, directly into his system." "And how do we get access to his system?" Helena looked at him, her expression hardening. "Thorn Tower, the penthouse, that's where the central server is. He would never let it out of his sight." "He's expecting you to walk in there alone and surrender," Julian said, the pieces of a desperate, insane plan beginning to form in his mind. "And that's exactly what you're going to do. But you won't be alone." The lobby of Thorn Tower was a cathedral of black marble and cold ambition. It was designed to intimidate, to make visitors feel small and insignificant. When Helena walked in at precisely 10:55 p.m., the security guards tensed, their hands moving to their earpieces. She was dressed simply, her face pale but resolute. She looked like a lamb walking to the slaughter. "I'm here to see Mr. Thorn," she said, her voice clear and steady. One of the guards spoke into his wrist. A moment later, he nodded. "The private elevator, ma'am. He's expecting you." As Helena stepped into the silent, mirrored elevator, she felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. The plan was insane. A house of cards built on a foundation of hope and rage. Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, Julian Croft was executing his part of the plan. He sat in the back of a nondescript panel van filled with humming electronic equipment, a headset clamped over his ears. Next to him sat Sinclair, his face grim, his fingers flying across a keyboard. "The fiber optic lines for this entire block run through a single utility conduit under 57th Street, Sinclair muttered. "We're in. I'm spoofing the building's security feed. For the next 10 minutes, their cameras will show an empty lobby and a stationary elevator." "Is the other team in position?" Julian asked. "They're on the roof of the adjacent building. They have a clear line of sight to the penthouse windows." In the elevator, Helena took a deep breath. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, discreet pair of glasses. She put them on. They looked like simple reading glasses, but embedded in the frame was a high-resolution micro-camera, feeding a live stream directly to the van. The elevator doors opened into Thorn's penthouse. The space was breathtaking and monstrous. A 2-story glass box overlooking Central Park, filled with priceless art that seemed to scream its value. Marcus Thorn stood by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, Lily standing beside him. He looked triumphant. "Helena," he said, his voice a silken purr. "Welcome home. You look tired. 20 years of scrubbing floors will do that to a person." Lily ran to Helena, throwing her arms around her. "I was so scared," she whispered. "It's all right," Helena said, holding her tight, her eyes scanning the room, feeding information to Julian. "I'm here now." Thorne gestured for his guards to take Lily. "Take the girl downstairs. Put her in the car with Peterson. If I don't call in 15 minutes, they have their instructions." As Lily was led away, Thorne circled Helena like a shark. "Now, let's get to work. The algorithm is waiting. It's missed its mother." He gestured to a sleek, black server rack, humming quietly in a glass-enclosed, temperature-controlled room, the heart of his empire. "The terminal is over there," he said, pointing to a minimalist desk with a glowing monitor. "You'll begin the integration at once." In the van, Julian watched the feed from Helena's glasses. "She's in." He's showing her the terminal. "Sinclair, are you ready to piggyback the connection as soon as she logs in?" "Ready and waiting," Sinclair said. Helena walked to the terminal. She sat down, her hands hovering over the keyboard. "You know I can't just begin," she said, stalling. "I need to run diagnostics. I need to understand the changes you've made to the core code over the last 20 years. Thorne laughed. "Always the perfectionist. Very well. You have 10 minutes to acclimate. Then you begin." He walked back to the window, his back to her, a posture of supreme arrogance. Helena began to type. On the screen, she was running meaningless diagnostic queries, but in her lap, hidden from view, she had a small, foldable keyboard connected by a thin wire to a device in her pocket. A custom-built microcomputer loaded with a single payload, the data for the impossible painting. As she typed on the desk keyboard with one hand, her other hand was typing the activation sequence for the kill switch. In the van, Sinclair's screen lit up. "I'm in. She's created a ghost partition. He can't see it. We have access to the core system." "Now, Helena," Julian whispered into his microphone, a direct audio feed linked to a tiny receiver in her ear. "The painting. Describe it. We need to build the file." Helena's voice was a low, steady murmur, audible only to Julian. "Layer 1. A gesso ground mixed with rabbit skin glue and marble dust, characteristic of the 15th century Florentine school. Layer 2. A primer of lead tin yellow, but applied with the cross-hatching brushwork of Titian." As she spoke, a team of 3 of the world's best digital artists, whom Julian had assembled in a frantic hour, worked in another location, translating her words into raw data, building the file for the impossible painting. It was a symphony of creation and destruction. 5 minutes, Helena," Thorne said from the window. "The face of the subject," Helena continued, her voice calm, "is rendered with the sfumato technique of Da Vinci. But the eyes are painted with the raw, frantic impasto of Van Gogh. The pigment contains traces of cadmium red, not available until the late 19th century. It's almost complete," the lead digital artist said over Julian's comms. "This thing is a monster, a beautiful, paradoxical monster." "Upload it to Sinclair," Julian commanded. "File received," Sinclair said a moment later. "Helena, the payload is ready. On your mark." Thorne turned from the window. "Time's up, my dear. The diagnostics are over." Helena took a deep breath. She looked up at him. "You're right, Marcus. They are." She hit the final key on the concealed keyboard. "Now," she whispered. In the van, Sinclair hit enter. Payload delivered. In the penthouse, the humming of the server rack changed pitch, rising to a high-pitched whine. Red lights began to flash behind the glass. Thorne spun around. "What have you done?" "The algorithm is a masterpiece of pattern recognition, Marcus," Helena said, standing up, her voice ringing with a power she hadn't possessed in 2 decades. And I just fed it the most beautiful pattern it has ever seen. A painting that breaks every rule. A perfect impossibility. It's trying to solve it. It's trying to find the artist's tell. The whine intensified. The lights on the server rack flickered wildly. "But there is no tell," she said, a triumphant, terrible smile on her face, "because the artist is a ghost, and the painting is a lie." A loud crack echoed through the room as a power conduit on the server blew. The main monitor went black. The lights in the penthouse flickered and died, plunging the room into the ambient glow of the city lights outside. The algorithm was dead. Thorne stared at the dead server, his face a mask of disbelief, then rage. He lunged for her. "You bitch! I'll kill you!" At that exact moment, the massive plate glass window behind him exploded inward in a shower of glittering shards. A black-clad figure on a zip line swung into the room, followed by another. Julian's private extraction team. They had used a directed sonic charge to shatter the glass. Thorne was thrown to the floor by the concussion. The operatives had him in restraints before he could recover. One of them touched his earpiece. "Alpha Team has the package. Croft 1, we are secure." He turned to Helena. "Ma'am, Mr. Croft sends his compliments. Your ride is waiting." As they led her to the shattered window, Helena looked back at Marcus Thorne, a broken man amidst the ruins of his digital empire. He was no longer a monster. He was just a man who had been outplayed. The first rays of dawn were painting the East River in hues of rose and grey. Julian stood with Helena and Lily on a private pier in Brooklyn, the Manhattan skyline a distant, silent witness. The air was cold, but it felt clean, fresh. Lily was wrapped in a blanket, sipping hot chocolate, her earlier terror replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. Helena was staring at the city, her city, which had been stolen from her for 20 years. "It's not over," Julian said quietly. "Thorne is in custody, but he has layers of lawyers, shell companies. The financial and legal battle will take years. His network is vast." "I know," Helena said. She turned to him, the morning light catching the newfound strength in her eyes. "But I'm not hiding anymore. You can't kill a ghost, but you can put a living woman on the witness stand." "I've already begun," Julian said. "Sinclair is liquidating Thorne's assets. We're using the ghost of his own algorithm against him, predicting his legal moves. We will dismantle his empire piece by piece. And I've established a foundation in your name, the Sovich Institute for Art and Authentication. We'll build you a new lab, the best in the world." Helena looked at him, a genuine small smile gracing her lips. "You're a formidable monster when you're on someone's side, Julian Croft." "I'm learning," he said, his gaze shifting to Lily, who was now sketching the sunrise in her notebook. He had almost lost her. The thought was a physical pain. He had spent his life acquiring things, companies, buildings, art, believing they were his legacy. He realized now, with the humbling clarity of a near miss, that his only true legacy was the quiet, artistic girl sketching the dawn. "What will you do now?" he asked Helena. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded, stained linen napkin, the one from the restaurant, the one with the breadstick sketch of the fraudulent pigment. She looked at it for a long moment. "I think," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I'm going to teach a class for a very promising student." She walked over to Lily and sat beside her, pointing to the sketch of the sunrise. "You've captured the light beautifully," she said, "but you've forgotten the reflection on the water. The light is never just the source. It's also the echo." Julian watched them, the brilliant doctor who had been a waitress and the quiet girl who was his entire world. He had walked into that restaurant a king, believing he had nothing left to learn. He had been so focused on the value of things that he had forgotten the worth of people. The equation of his life had been unbalanced for years. But now, watching the two of them, the woman who could see the truth in a single brushstroke, and the girl who could find the beauty in a simple sunrise, he felt a sense of profound, quiet equilibrium. The books were finally balanced. We move through our lives, surrounded by ghosts, people whose pasts are hidden behind a uniform, a name tag, a weary smile. Julian Croft, a man who traded in futures, thought he was hiring a tutor for his granddaughter. In the end, the woman who had lost her past saved his future. It's a story that reminds us that the most brilliant minds are not always found in boardrooms, and that true value is not something that can be bought or sold at auction. It's found in the quiet courage of a second chance, in the discipline of a well-drawn line, and in the realization that sometimes the masterpiece you've been searching for has been standing right in front of you all along, just waiting to be seen.